So we're going to talk about friendship and books 8 and 9 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and then we're done with Aristotle as far as studying him. We're going to keep talking about Aristotle over the course of the semester, because now we've looked at two major moral philosophers, Plato and Aristotle, and when we're looking at other people, we're going to do some comparison back and forth, right? We'll say, this person's different from Aristotle and Plato in this way, they're like them in this way. I also have this sort of schema up here, and you notice it's sort of a timeline, right, for your life and my life, and anybody who goes to college's life, bless you. And I want you to think about this. Over the course of your life, you have progressed from elementary school to middle school to high school and now college, and you've been in college here for 3 or 4 years. Some of you are seniors, you're graduating this year, some of you are juniors. This is your 3rd year. And what I want you to think about, you had friends at each point, right? You had friends in elementary school. How many of those friends did you carry forth into middle school? The answers are going to be different for each of you, right? Because some of you went to a middle school, and most of the kids from your elementary school didn't go to that middle school. So that makes it tougher. But then you also, even those of you who did sort of go in a cohort and you knew everybody in your middle school, you changed friends. Why did that happen? And the answer from elementary school to middle school, the answer why that happened would be a bit different than the transition from middle school to high school, wouldn't it? Because you're at different stages in your maturation. The stuff that matters to you as an elementary school student, for the most part, doesn't matter to you quite as much in high school, and new things have come to matter to you much more. And then you probably, this is your first break of the year. Remember back 2 years ago when you were freshmen here, or 3 years ago for those of you who are seniors, and your first fall break. And most of you probably went home, right? Because most of you live more or less locally, within 3-4 hours of here. Some people are from Idaho or places like that. And that was your first time coming home from college, and you probably already began to notice that some of your friends, you were no longer as interested in hanging out with them. You no longer had as much in common with them. Does this ring true to you? It's something you've experienced? Some of your friends you may have actually gotten closer to as a result, but some of them you left behind. The same thing is going to happen as you go. Some of you are going to grad school, you're going on to professional schools like law school or medical school. Not everybody from Marist is going there. Those of you who are going into a career, you may know a few people in your workplace, but you're going to get to know a whole bunch of other people. And odds are, in your generation, you're probably going to have at least 5 different career changes over the course of your life. That's what the job people tell us these days. Where you're not just changing from one company to another, you're actually changing what you do. That's why it's so important that you have these skills that you learn, say, in philosophy classes, being able to think things out, right? Because whatever you're training for right now, that may not exist in 10 years, except for med school. We're always going to need doctors. But the specific things that you're training for, they may change very considerably. We're not so interested in that sort of stuff. We're interested in friendship. So think at each course. In your experience, Aristotle is all about using your experience to make sense of the world. How many friends you've left behind? How many people that you had a relationship with that you no longer have a relationship with? There's probably quite a few, right? Myself, I've been very bad about this. I have only one friend that I stayed in touch with consistently since high school. Of course, for me, high school was almost 25 years ago. He was my best friend. He was the best man at a wedding. He's going to be the best man again, I think. We were part of a circle of friends. This is familiar to you, too. You have a group of friends that you hang out with. But then everybody ended up going their separate ways, where they died. Some of our friends actually died, you know, fairly young because of the sort of things that they were doing. Well, this can be your experience. Elementary school, I didn't keep in touch with anybody from elementary school once I was in college. I think I kept in touch with one person from my elementary school when I was in high school and middle school. That's about it. Now, I had kind of a weird path because I went to a public elementary school, and then I went to a private middle school, which was very ritzy. You either had to be very smart or very rich to get in, and the two didn't really mix. And then I went to a Catholic high school. So not a lot of people, you know, moving from one to the next. But still, I didn't keep in touch with people. And then I've moved, you know, lots of times. I went to college in Wisconsin, in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and I was friends with a lot of people, and, you know, had a very active social life, and you know, you tell people, yeah, we're going to stay in touch forever, and you got their phone numbers and their addresses. And then I went down to Milwaukee and worked for a year, and went off to Europe for a little while. And how many of them do you think I actually stayed in contact with? About 5 or 6. And by the time that I was in grad school down in Illinois, and that was for about 7 years, I lost touch with almost everybody from college. Just from college, not from like high school or middle school, just from college. And then I moved to Indiana. I started my first job, my first major job in the prison. And then I lost touch with most of the people from grad school. You know, and I'd meet other people here and there at conferences or fellowships and things like that. And you'd add to your contact list. Then, you know, I moved down to Fayetteville State University, and did I follow up on a lot of the friendships I had in other places? No. You know what changed that for me? Facebook. Because with Facebook, you know, you go online, and you guys will never actually experience this because your generation has grown up with Facebook. Well, how many of you use Facebook? So probably about 95% of the class. How long have you guys been on Facebook? How long have you had an account?
Since freshman year.
Since freshman year of high school, right? Not
college.
Freshman year of college. What about the rest of you?
Senior.
Senior year of high school. What about you?
Oh yeah, I think it was in sophomore.
Sophomore year. Where do other people fit in?
I went for 7 years, or 6 years about.
So that's somewhere in high school, right? Because you're a junior?
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually pulled it off, so when I got mine I was 19.
Okay. So, you know, parents are kind of the restrictor on that, right? You know, they don't let you, or maybe not for you guys, I don't know. I know a lot of parents who don't let their kids have Facebook accounts until a certain age, you know, because of online predators and all these sorts of things. Which is real, you know, just not as prevalent as people often make it out to be. So you guys are never going to experience this, leaving all these people behind and being out of touch and really having no way other than, you know, doing like some extensive research of finding them. Now, if you've lost touch with a friend, just look them up on Facebook. If they're not on there, they're probably on LinkedIn, right? Or some other social network. I don't know. Are there some other social networks that you guys use that we, you know, Gen X, 40-year-olds don't use? Whatever the cool thing is, I don't know. I don't pay attention to these sort of things because those change like this. Facebook is here to stay. And Facebook is where you carry out a good deal of your friendship, right? That Facebook has transformed the sort of stuff we're going to study with Aristotle. It's allowed one factor to be taken out of the equation. So actually, that's a good jumping off point. So Aristotle says that certain things are required for friendship. What does he think is actually required? One of the things that he says you have to have is spending time together. Now, that's hard to do when you're at a distance, isn't it? Any of you have long-distance relationships or had long-distance relationships? Just a few of you? What's that like?
It doesn't work.
Doesn't work, yeah. It's very tough. That's part of why I moved up here, actually, because we were sick of doing the long distance thing. I was in North Carolina, and my fiance was up here. That gets old very quickly, doesn't it? What else can you say about it? Do you have to deliberately make time for things?
Yeah, it's not like you just on a whim say, hey, let's go grab dinner. You have to
Exactly.
actually make plans for like, what are you doing Thursday night or Saturday or something like that.
And then when you are together, there's this pressure to, we've only got 1 week. Let's really make this week great. Did you guys have that going on as well? Yeah. Distance is an issue. Aristotle actually says there's distance and time, and these are factors. Aristotle says at one point in this famous quote that in order to become friends with somebody, truly friends with somebody, you have to eat a barrel of salt together. Now, he doesn't mean that you actually sit down and scoop salt and, so good. Well, we like salty things, but nobody likes salt that much, I hope, because that would kill you. What he means is, at each meal, you sprinkle a little bit of salt on your food. The cooks generally, leave it up to the people to salt their own food. So to eat a barrel full of salt together means that you are with that person continuously for a sustained period of time. Eating with people is one of the ways we become friends, isn't it? Being in classes is another good example of how you become friends. Being on teams, right? So time is a factor, distance is a factor. Facebook and other social media, the whole Web 2.0 phenomena, allows us to overcome distance and even to some degree time too, doesn't it? Because if your friend is interacting with you, think about the way interactions work in Facebook. If you want to talk to somebody directly in real time, what do you have to do?
Make time.
What's that?
You have to make time.
Well, what else has to happen though? That's what you do on your end. They have to be, if you want to talk in real time, what function do you use in Facebook? You just go on their wall and write something or do a message? Chat, right. Chat is real time. You can do it in other things. You can do it in Google. As a matter of fact, my fiance and I, when our relationship, which in a way started 25 years ago, because we met in high school, when we were first getting back in touch, we used Google Chat because you could, go back and forth, line after line, and we'd find it goes 4 hours, right? When you're chatting with somebody, time can pass pretty quickly. What is it then when somebody writes on your wall? That's not real time, is it? It kind of feels like it is. Like, you write something, you put a status update, and they say something in response. A couple hours later, you look at your Facebook, and you write something in response, and then they write something in response a couple minutes later, and a couple more hours pass. But it's as if time doesn't actually exist, isn't it? With Facebook. Or other forms of social media. It allows us to overcome these factors, which in a way allows us to become friends and maintain friends more easily. You guys are in a better position than lazy people like I am. Facebook is great for those who wouldn't make the effort to write a letter. Which is probably most of us, isn't it? I'm terrible about promising to write people letters and then not doing it. Even emails, I don't follow up. I go to conferences and you meet people, and you're like, yeah, we're gonna have to talk about Plato. You have a common interest. They've written some things about Plato, and then you email them. You even give them your card. They give you your card. You guys are going to start experiencing this pretty soon with whatever field you're going into. Just because you gave somebody your card, that doesn't mean that you actually have a relationship ongoing yet. You have to follow up on it. But Facebook allows that. LinkedIn is another great example too, because when Aristotle's talking about friendships, he's not just talking about the people that you really love spending time with all the time, your chums from high school or something like that. He's also talking about professional relationships. And what's LinkedIn for? How many of you are on LinkedIn? Okay, so about a quarter of the class. You should probably all be on LinkedIn now because you're juniors and seniors. And it's important for a networking tool. And what actually gets you jobs in a lot of cases, who you know, and who can send you information, and who can vouch for you, and all that sort of stuff. So you probably do want to get on LinkedIn. Okay, so that's all sort of just background stuff, trying to set the stage. What does Aristotle actually say about friendship, besides time, space? All this. Why do we care about friendship? What makes it valuable? Why do we need friends?
Someone.
Well, Mr. Bernholz, pull it first, and then go ahead.
Friends are valuable because we need people to talk to, and
Okay.
otherwise, without friends, we'd just be here on our own.
Yeah. So, how should we express that? Aristotle talks about it as you need friends for the good life. And what you're talking about is sort of as companionship, right? What's the opposite of that? Being lonely, being on your own. And some people, very few people, like being totally alone. Most people don't. Most people feel lonely if they don't have somebody, yeah.
Also mentions that the needing friendship in order to preserve wealth and possession.
Yes, Aristotle is very realistic. He thinks that we need friends in order to have security. And that's okay. I mean, that we often think of that as, oh, no, we shouldn't be friends with somebody for that reason. But as you get older, you realize, especially as you go through crises, that's when you actually do find out who your real friends are. Because real friends have your back. And real friends, when you bring up a problem with them, they don't say, I don't have time to talk with you about that. So, you go through a death, you go through a divorce, you go through a major illness, you go through a change in job or wealth or something like that. That shows you who your real friends are. And Aristotle says, even if things really go south, at least a good friend is there to console you. What were you going to say?
I was going to say someone to confide in.
Someone to confide in. Okay, that's companionship, and we'll say confiding. And we feel deprived if we don't have that. If we have nobody to talk to, which is the case for many people, we feel bad. That we can't actually enjoy the good life without that. We also need friends. What are you going to say before I throw some more stuff?
I was going to say something along the security.
Okay.
You just need some friends that help you out because, we live in a society and you can't not have somebody there, people there to assist you and
Yeah.
assist them even helps with happiness too because you get a certain gratification out of that.
Yeah, and that's where we get to the next one. Aristotle says that, so happiness is this life of virtuous activity, doing good things. You got to have somebody to do good things too, right? Or you're just going to walk down the street and find some people, hey, I want to be generous. Well, that wouldn't actually be generous. Being generous to your friends is important. Family would be included in there, because family and friends actually for Aristotle overlap quite a bit. And this is kind of interesting. So we need friends in part for what they provide us. We also need friends for what they allow us to provide them. That's the kind of social animals that we are. We're needy in a couple different ways. We're not just needy in that we need to take from other people. We're needy in that in order to feel okay, in order to really have a good life, we need other people that we can give to. And we need to have a personal connection to them. This is why, you see those ads for Save the Children and all that. That's why they have that component of the kid writing a letter back, so that the relationship can develop. I'll actually tell you kind of an interesting story about the prison stuff. you know, some people have to learn how to be good friends, have to learn how to have relationships with other people. And a lot of the guys that I taught in the prison were kind of deficient that way. One of the best things that Indiana has, and I think a lot of other states have this as well, is, at least in Indiana State Prison, the prisoners can adopt cats. They can adopt cats that would otherwise be put to sleep from the Humane Society. So, you know, it keeps the cat alive, which is good. And these, you know, you picture these big guys, because a lot of them, you know, work out a lot of the time, covered with tattoos, you know, wearing prison white and khaki, and sitting there in their cell, petting a kitten, which they raise. And they know, too, that they'd better stay on their good behavior, because if they screw up, that cat gets taken away from them. And the cats are allowed to roam through the entire prison. I think the prison likes it in part because Indiana State Prison is the oldest one in Indiana. It goes back to like the 1840s. And there are rats and mice and stuff like that. And the cats help take care of that as well. But those cats roam throughout the entire prison. Nobody hurts them. Because anybody who would actually hurt a cat, you know, a prisoner, it's not the guards who would do anything to them, it's the other prisoners. Because they recognize in that cat a vulnerable creature, and many of them form strong connections with these creatures. For a lot of these guys, it's the first time in their life that they have something in a fairly controlled environment that they can learn how to love and develop a certain kind of friendship, which then can be part of training for how to, you know, move to better stages. It's a great thing. As a matter of fact, one of the guys who I used to work with used to be my tutor. If you watch NBC Lockup, any of you watch that show? There's actually an episode about him adopting his cat and what goes on in the prison with these cats, Aaron Brown. And now he was a much more advanced than other guys emotionally. It's part of how he became my tutor and how we became friends ourselves. But you know, he and I talked quite a bit about this phenomenon of the prison cats and what's going on there. It's not just that somebody needs, you know, a warm body to curl up with them. They needed somebody to do good to. That's part of friendship. That's part of relationships. Maybe not at the start, right? When you were little babies, were you looking for somebody to do good to? It was the opposite. You were looking for somebody to pick you up and rock you and clean you and feed you and that sort of stuff. But as you progressed, as you got older, that became something important to you. So these are all real issues. Let's look then at what's required for friendship. So Aristotle says that you need to spend time with the person. You need to be with them physically in space for a while. What else is involved in friendship? You have to have a certain kind of feeling towards them, right? You have to delight in the person. Now this could be in a lot of different ways. He's very realistic about what this delight could be. Finding somebody you like to have sex with, that's a kind of delighting in them, right? You may detest them otherwise, but you enjoy having sex with them. That's a kind of friendship, according to Aristotle. Not a very, not a very lasting kind of friendship, not the paradigm, but it's a kind. Your business partner. Why are you business partners with somebody? Well, because you wanted to work with them. The guys that you're with on the team, maybe you're not friends with all of them, maybe you actually hate some of them, if it's like sports teams that I've known. But most of them, you have some sort of common thing that you're working towards, and you actually do enjoy their company for the most part, right? For the most part. That's delighting in somebody. The people that you've held on to as friends, that you're gonna, when you guys go home on break, you're gonna see, you're gonna connect back up with. Probably talking on Facebook before you do that, right? Hey, what are you guys doing this weekend? Those are people you delight in. So there has to be that feeling. You also, like Aristotle says, have to wish well for the other person. You have to want the other person to do well, to be well, and not for the sake of something else, but for their own sake. Again, this is the paradigm. This is the core example. And it has to be mutual. Can you actually, in Aristotle's sense, be friends with somebody who doesn't want to be friends with you? You can't. You can be friendly towards them, but you can't be friends. You can't have a friendship with somebody who actually doesn't want to be friends with you, who doesn't desire good for you. This is where we're going to get some really interesting stuff. But before we do that, so he talks about 3 kinds of friendships, and he says, if we want to think about the kinds of friendship, we have to think about the reasons why people are friends with each other, what they get from each other, what they are enjoying or delighting in. What does he say that, what kinds of friendship are there, according to Aristotle?
I think the first one he talks about is utility,
Very good.
where they both benefit from each other.
Very good. And I think a lot, in our society, we often wouldn't call those people friends. we do say about using friends and, that person's just friends with them to get something. But Aristotle would even extend this to like business associates, your co-workers, people like that. Or maybe teammates that you don't like, but you need somebody to set a pick for you, or to pass the ball to you. Trying to think of what other examples would relate to people, the athletes in our class, because the pass thing would go for all the soccer guys too. Do an assist. You need people to. Are you guys offense or defense as the soccer players in here?
Defense.
Defense. So who else is on soccer?
They're not here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, they're relying on you to actually keep their work from not going to naught by keeping the other guys from scoring a goal, right? But you get the idea. There are friendships, and there are friendships of utility. There are friendships of usefulness, where somebody is getting something from somebody else. What other kinds are there? What's a higher, more inclusive kind of friendship, or objective, or reason for friendship? Do you remember? The second one? Yeah.
Friendship based on pleasure.
Very good. And this is different, right? I mean, the people that you still hang out with from high school, it's not because they're great business connections that they're going to set you up with a job. Maybe a few of them are that way. Or because they throw great parties and you want to go and get the free food and drink, that would probably just be utility. There are people that you want to hang out with because they're pleasant. You like their sense of humor. You watch the same kind of movies together. You enjoy doing pickup sports with them. What else do people... What other ways? I should have a lot more examples, shouldn't I? But you guys can think of examples. I mean, what are other things that people do together that are pleasant? I'm a bad example because you know what I did most of college, other than studying, is hanging out at bars and playing in bands, because I like music, and working out, and having a lot of relationships. So not a very good example, What do you guys do with your friends that you find pleasurable?
My friends like working on cars and stuff, so do that with
That's
them.
a good example, yeah. Finding some sort of common activity. Working on cars, you can do that because there's always something going wrong with somebody's car, isn't there? You'll always have some common thing to do. Watching the game, that's one that's easy for me to relate to. I suppose I did that in college too, yeah. What else? What else do people do together that's fun?
Play video games.
Yeah, I think video games probably consumes a lot, yeah.
For me, there's one particular person that like actually doing homework and talking to each other, like.
Yeah. A lot of our talking to each other, I think, would be a matter of pleasure. It may not be particularly edifying, but you enjoy it, right? there, I have some relatives, when I talk to them, I'm not looking for them to enlighten me, but I love talking with them, and I feel bad if I don't talk to them. What else? What other kinds of things that people do? Yeah.
Maybe you want to trip together.
Oh, that's a good example. Yeah, traveling together. Aristotle says that another thing that's important for friendship is having common experiences, common interests and stuff like that. And travel is a great way to do that because you're trying all sorts of new things. You can compare your reactions. All these sorts of things that go into why we're friends with people can come to play in that as well. So yeah, that's a good example. That's probably enough. What's the third then kind of friendship? This may be a little harder to relate to. Yeah.
Friendship based on what? On the good?
Yes. Or another way of saying this is virtue. Now Aristotle kind of goes back and forth about this. At one point he talks about this as if this is extremely rare. This is the paradigm. This is where you like the person genuinely for who they are because you find their character attractive. You think that they're a good person. And he says these kinds of friendships, are actually kind of rare. But then in other places he talks as if this is more common. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Now these are three different reasons why you could like somebody. You get something from them, something that may not be in fact pleasure. Could be money, could be prestige, could be a job, could be all sorts of things. Could be that you actually enjoy spending time with them, or it could be that you genuinely think that that person is a good person and you like being with them for that reason. Now notice that this often includes this. Pleasant friends are, in fact, useful friends. They're useful for giving you pleasure, right? You could talk about using them. And friends who are friends because of virtue or because they're genuinely good people and they click together that way, that will be pleasant. I mean, if being good is unpleasant to you, you're not good, according to Aristotle, right? There's something wrong. If doing the right thing to you is not enjoyable, then something somewhere has gone haywire and you're not yet virtuous. You might be continent. Remember we talked about this last time? You may be forcing yourself to do the good thing, and that's better than not doing the good thing, but it's not yet enjoying it. And so people who are genuinely good and who like each other's characters, they will find each other's company pleasant. Very pleasant, actually. They may have to challenge each other once in a while and say, hey, I think you're not doing the right thing. And they may have arguments. Maybe they're not entirely virtuous. Here's a great example. Because I've explained this to you before, where are my vices, if I have vices, which I probably do? Two main ones that I have problems with that we've looked at so far. Moderation, so I got to be this size. Eating too much, not exercising when I should, that sort of thing. And anger, managing anger well. What happens when you put two friends, who both manage anger poorly together, but also actually hold each other to high standards? What happens in situations like that?
I know, when I was younger, one of my friends had a big anger thing, and we actually got into a fist fight once, but the next morning we're hanging out, BSing and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you hold other people to high standards, and in the friendship of virtue, you hold yourself to high standards, your friend holds you to high standards, and vice versa. And you tend to, remember when we talked about anger, anger is sort of like the servant that hears a few things and then runs off and starts doing stuff. You're probably going to get in fights with them. So getting in fights is not necessarily a sign that you don't have a good friendship. It's a sign that you have some stuff to work on, with your anger. If you're getting in fights because you want to use the other person and they're not letting you use them, that's a whole different ballgame, isn't it? Or you're getting in a fight with somebody because your friendship was based totally on pleasure, and now you're not getting the pleasure that you want from them, and now you don't like them anymore, but they still want you to hang out with them. That's very different than this. And you know, the good friendships are also going to include usefulness. Good friends are good to each other. They do good things for each other. The friend who I mentioned, you know, from high school, he has in many ways helped me, just by the way he acts, understand what Aristotle was talking about. Just by the way he behaves, not realizing. He's not a philosopher, he's a businessman. He has a computer company. But he's a good friend. And he's a genuinely good guy. Now, what kind of friendships fit into this? Well, like I said, business associations fit into this, right? What about your romantic love interests? This is something that Aristotle didn't devote an awful lot of attention to because he's more interested in you know, philosophical pursuits, and the Greeks didn't really value the you know, male-female relationship as highly as we do in our society. And if you read his stuff, you also notice he doesn't hold women to be equal to men, right? You guys notice that from here? He treats women as if they're inferior, men as if they're superior. Let's say we put all that stuff aside. Let's say we bring Aristotle up to date, 2011. And we talk about romantic relationships, which are very important in our lives, aren't they? I think a lot of you, your idea of the good life is going to include some sort of person involved, right? Or maybe not. Maybe you just, you know, have maybe you're only interested in sex. Then that's a matter of pleasure, right? Sex is pleasurable, should be. If it's not, they're doing something wrong, right? And there's all sorts of guides and websites that you can look on to help you out. New videos, I think, you know, and probably courses you could take, you know, at some universities. That would probably help you with that, right? And Aristotle would say, hey, you know, we enjoy sex because sex is enjoyable. It is a pleasure, just like eating is a pleasure and drinking is a pleasure. People who are involved with each other in a relationship, they hook up, and they're going to have sex with each other. They like the way each other looks. Maybe they, you know, he makes me laugh, you know, that sort of thing. They hook up with each other. Now they're going to make a relationship out of it. Often that doesn't work, right? One of the reasons it often doesn't work is because they think that they're having this sort of thing. Because in our society, we often pressure ourselves that we have to be having this kind of relationship, when it's actually this kind of relationship. And having, you know, wrong ideas about what you're actually involved in is you know, a good way to go astray. These kind of relationships are not lasting, Aristotle says, because as soon as the other person stops being pleasant, stops giving pleasure, the relationship is going to break up. That's why, and I'm not talking about sex now at this point, unless somebody's had a really, really unusual sex life. That's why you're not friends with all of your middle school and high school friends anymore, either. They've quit being pleasant. You guys enjoyed the same things. You enjoyed company before. Maybe you're not interested in the same things as you and they were interested in. If that's the case, well, let's take traveling, for example. You know, a lot of people, this is the time for you guys to travel, actually, while you're unattached, for the most part, while you're young, so you can go up and down hills and, you know, schlep stuff all over the place and live in youth hostels very cheaply and go see the world. Now's the time for you to do that, not when you're older. And you know, I told you guys, I think, about the, you know, invitation to go to Nepal that I turned down because I realized it would mean going up and down these mountains. I said, that's not for me, right? You guys could do that. But let's say you go traveling with somebody and they were your friend, or a whole bunch of people. You traveled every year with them. People are going to drop out of that group. they're not going to like that stuff anymore after a certain point. You may be the one person who sticks with it. Those of you who played in a band, some of your bandmates are going to drop out. They're not going to be as interested in making music together. Each one of these things, if your friendship is just based on pleasure, then it's going to last as long as the pleasure does. Same thing with utility. Utility is even more fleeting. If your friendship is just a business association, and you think to yourself that you are actually really good friends with this person, when, as soon as you quit being useful to them, they're gone. So you want to be aware of this and not mix up these different kinds of friendship. Now Aristotle also talks about some other kinds of friendship, and he says we can fit these in. He talks about unequal friendships, and he gives examples. Father to son, elder to younger, man to wife, ruler to subject. This is where we see that sort of patriarchal viewpoint, devaluing women and elevating men. But let's stick with like the parents-children thing. He says it's not the same. The kind of relationship, the kind of friendship between parents and children is not the same as rulers and subjects. Now, some of you may have experienced that sort of relationship if you had very domineering parents. Aristotle says that's a mistake. There ought to actually be a friendship between parents and children. What kind of friendship? Well, that's going to depend on their capacities. But it's going to be an unequal friendship. Until when? Until you become an adult. You guys are actually, if you haven't already experienced it, you're on your way to experiencing something kind of interesting, which is where you become seen as fully an adult by your parents and taken seriously as not as a teenager, which none of you are anymore, right? But as a young man.